Now, if you're one of those people that likes to increase their productivity when you're out and about with your laptop by using a portable second monitor, well, I've got the laptop for you now, and this one is from ASUS that I first saw in CES in Las Vegas in January, and it really impressed me. And now that I've been testing it out, well, it's even better in person, of course. So this is called the Zenbook Duo. It's the 2024 model, and we have the dual screen. So right now I've got it in its laptop mode, and these screens are 3K screens, OLED, maximum brightness 550 nits. And when you want that productivity, you simply need to remove the keyboard, which attaches on magnetically with pogo ports. And there we go. We now have the two screens. And this is brilliant for productivity. With the included built-in kickstand, you can prop it up like I have it here. You can run the two different screens. You can even put it down into a style like this. Instead of having it landscape, you can use it like this too as well. You got that option. And it's got a lot of power within it as well. There's no compromise really on anything with this model. We've got the new series of Intel chips. So it's the Ultra 9 185H that's within this. So 16 cores, 22 threads, maximum turbo is 5.1 gigahertz. And this configuration that I've got is almost the max spec. It's got 32 gigabytes of LPDDR5X RAM that's running at a very high 7500 mega transfers. So it's really quick RAM here, which is going to aid in the performance of the ARC graphics we have from Intel, which is new, of course, their new generation of integrated graphics, which the performance is basically double that of what we had with the old Iris Xe graphics. And this configuration that I've got has 1 terabyte of PCIe 4.0 storage. The keyboard backlit really doesn't have any compromises, and you can connect it up just like that. Put it back on Bluetooth, it disables that display, you're back up and running. The battery in this, well, it's 75 watt hours, and I'll let you know later on what kind of battery life I can get out of this in this in-depth review. And it's a little long, I'll warn you, because I've got a lot of ground to cover here with a laptop such as this with the dual screens. So what does ASUS include with our Zenbook Duo? Well, we get our power supply. Now note that they've gone with these different style plugs for them. So that means they're interchangeable between the different models, which is quite good. And look at how small it is. It's tiny for a 65 watt power supply. And you simply just need to place it in like so, turn it, that's on there. Now in just 30 minutes, it will charge that 75 watt hour battery to 50%, which is impressive. And we get a very nice Type-C to Type-C cable with this Velcro strap. The weight of our Zenbook here is excellent. So 1.7 kilos because they're using magnesium. That is with the keyboard too, by the way. With our cable and power supply, which you're going to need to take with you, of course, it brings it up to almost 1.9 kilos, which is excellent considering, again, that it has the dual screens and the removable keyboard. Now you would think having two screens that the thickness would be pretty bulky and chunky. It's a little bit more than a typical Ultrabook. It's 14.6 at its thinnest point up to 19.9 millimeters, but still very good for this style of laptop, having both of those screens and the kickstand too included. So you can see at the back, just before I showed you, there were some little rubber feet. There's another two here at the front, and this is where you can pull down that kickstand. This is the furthest back that kickstand will go. Now, there's this little tiny cover here that I thought was a quick access panel for the SSD, and you can just see the SSD starting right here at the very top. That's it there. So in order to access that SSD, sadly, it's not just removing those two screws in this cover, which would have been perfect. It seems that this little access panel is for the ribbon cable here for the motherboard, or what looks like maybe for the screen and the power right here, which is disappointing. It would have been great if that was for the SSD. Now, in order to gain access to the internals, you need to remove all of the screws around here, undo this. We've got the hinge here too. It's a little complicated, not so easy as other laptops, and I'm not even going to go there. But I did see in Vegas at CES what it looks like broken down. You can see here, this very short clip, so there's a lot going on. Upgradability, well, you can't upgrade the RAM or our modem here, the Wi-Fi, sorry, that can't be upgraded, but you can only replace that SSD. It's just a single slot PCIe 4.0. Two downwards firing speakers, which are Harman Kardon tuned, and here is a sample of what they sound like. They're pretty good for a laptop, an Ultrabook like this. As for ports, very good. So on the right side here, you'll see we do have a 3.5mm with mic support, HDMI 2.1. I've tested it. It is working with my TV, my monitor at 4K 120 10-bit. Exit vent there. There's another one on the other side. So there's dual fans in this, keeping it cool. And I will be monitoring the thermals in this review and let you know exactly what it's like after quite a few days of use too, by the way. USB 3.1 Gen 1 and 2 Thunderbolt 4s. Both of them support power delivery, video out, data of course, 40 gigabits per second, both of those. And here's that other little vent there that I just talked about before. So you will feel a bit of hot air come out of this and a little bit of noise too later when it is being pushed hard in performance mode. The lid, like the whole build, is made out of this magnesium alloy. That's how they've kept the weight of it down. And we can see a little bit of a pattern here on the top. Again, the Zenbook branding feels really good. Pressing down on this, there's basically no flex, being a fully laminated OLED screen that it does have below it. And opening it up, can you open it up one-handed? Yes, you can do that. So there you can see that keyboard, which of course is removable, that I showed you at the start there, and it's got its own battery and connects up to Bluetooth. But at the moment, it's got the Pogo port pin connector there that's keeping it in place. Now, there are magnets that are located here. There's some here that hold it into place. And I can tell you now that honestly, typing on this keyboard, when I have it in the laptop mode, I wouldn't know that it was a dual screen laptop. You kind of forget about that, and it's just like a normal kind of Ultrabook, and very good travel on these keys. Great keyboard. There's no bounce, there's no flex pressing down here. Very good. Get 1.4 millimeters of travel, and it is a backlit keyboard, which you can now see. So it's a great looking backlit keyboard, evenly distributed. There's no keys that are a little duller or anything like that. And overall, a great keyboard. Now the power button is located just above the keyboard too as well, keeping it out of the way. Touchpad is very nice, a smooth glass-like finish. We've got gestures that work really good. Finer movements with the cursor, it doesn't jump around either, which is great. So you can see now as I just move it just at the very top of the screen there, it's not jumping around, not going all over the place. Really like this touchpad. And then to remove that keyboard, when you want to use it in the dual screen mode, you just simply lift it off like so. And you can see that there is the Pogo port pin connector for it. So now that other display has turned on and I can use this. So we've got the exact same panel. More on those screens in just a second, but I wanted to point out that the keyboard has right here, as you can see, its own little Bluetooth switch and a Type-C port just to charge that built-in battery. So you don't have to use it plugged in, and it gives you a lot of freedom. And I'll show you now and run through the kind of setups you can use with the dual screen mode that it does offer. Dual 3K OLED screens, 120 Hz. I can set up, for example, video editing with the two screens like this. So that keyboard does work really well, flawlessly really, when connected to Bluetooth. I'm not noticing any issues with latency compared to when I do have it plugged in. And then I have my timeline here with Adobe Premiere Pro and the effects bar, and I can easily customize and tweak all of this. In the lower screen and the upper screen here, now I can have the full 14 inches of this OLED there for my video preview. So it works out really great. So that kickstand is supporting the weight of the laptop just fine. It's very steady. It does not wobble at all, even when using the touch screens. And you can also prop it up in the vertical position instead of being in landscape, those screens. And this is going to be great for multitasking, again, and ideal for websites and spreadsheets that you can use and just take advantage of both of those 3K OLED screens. And if you ever wanted to, you can use a virtual keyboard. Now, there's all sorts of customization that ASUS lets us do with this keyboard. So this is a standard mode here, having a touchpad, your keys there, and then the keyboard setup. Now, typing on this, it's okay, but it's not like a hardware keyboard. You don't get that same feedback, of course. It's completely flat. There's no travel. It's just a flat screen. So I don't like this as much, and I honestly don't see a lot of people using this, but at least we do have that option. You've got a lot of different configurations set up with it all. You can change and swap over some keys here. You can reduce the size of it, whatnot. So I can make it a half-screen keyboard, and then you can add in different panels. So there are a lot of options with this keyboard, and you do have gestures to bring it up, to remove it, to get it down. So I can just swipe down with 3 fingers, to swipe up and swipe down to just change it over here. You can see now I have the touchpad. So there's a lot of things you can do with this. I won't go into a lot of detail there because otherwise this video is just going to get way too long. But it is good. It's a good experience, but you can only go so far with a virtual keyboard versus a proper physical keyboard. So the Zenbook Duo has absolutely stunning screens. Both of them are 3K OLED screens, 120 Hz with HDR on. You're getting a peak brightness of 550 when it's displaying HDR content. Standard definition, standard content is 400 nits, and I've measured 388 nits at the moment with my Spider X Pro, and color gamut coverage, so DCI-P3 is 100%, sRGB according to my Spider here, Spider X is 100%, NTSC is 95%, Adobe RGB is 97%, and 100% of P3 color coverage there, gamut is really good. This is amazing. Such a good looking screen. Now remember, it does support the ASUS Pen 2.0, and the touch performance I have found to be really good. No problems with it at all. So fully laminated OLEDs. And yes, you will notice reflections, of course, with these. That's just the way it is, but you get that contrast. And it does have a VISA certified 500 with our blacks. So true, proper blacks you get with an OLED. And of course, you get those really quick response times. So it's an excellent screen. Camera sample now with the Zenbook Duo. So I like what I'm hearing, definitely. These microphones are good. Now you do have the option for just configuring those microphones to have them aimed towards you more, to have them more 360, and the AI noise cancellation too for any background noise. Camera quality itself, well, good to see that it is 1080p. I've noticed sometimes there's a little bit of almost what looks like a beautifying or filter effect on my face. That's the only thing. Otherwise, really good webcam quality, and especially those microphones. They sound excellent. All right, so I've swapped over to screen capture now. This just makes things easier for us to see with no reflections and whatnot, and it's a little clearer. So you can see here that we've got Windows 11 Home. It's not Windows 11 Pro, which is a bit of a surprise to me considering the price of this machine. So when I reviewed this, made this review, it's 2,500 euros. Yes, it's expensive. So I would have thought it would have come with the Pro edition of Windows 11, but it does not. Now you see here that when you look in the device manager, we have the AI boost. That's because the new Core Ultra 9185 and all the Core Ultra series now has an NPU with it. So if you're doing anything with AI, you've got that on board. It might come through with later Windows updates that they use the AI from the Intel chips and later AMD chips as well, the NPUs, to help accelerate things, but we don't know yet. That could be in the future, it could be years away. And you'll see, as I mentioned at the start there, listed 22 times because we have 22 threads with this particular chipset. And out of the Core Ultra series, these ones, it's the more powerful one, 45 watt part. You'll see the ARC graphics there is listed, and our SSD. So it's PCIe 4.0, a Western Digital drive, the SN560. I benchmarked it, and the speeds are, disappointing actually, because this should be around 7,000 and 7,000 for sequential reads and writes if it was a top-end PCIe 4 SSD. And again, factoring the price, I think they should have used a faster SSD. That's just me personally here. I have 1 terabyte of storage, and I think it should really be 2 terabytes, which you can also get. That's the absolute max configuration. And those RAM speeds, very quick here. So LPDDR5X RAM. This is soldered onto the motherboard. You cannot upgrade it. It is very quick. This is almost 7,500 mega transfers, or as listed here as megahertz. Incredibly quick RAM, 32 gigabytes worth of it, and that speed is going to aid especially the integrated graphics. So I've run a few benchmarks here. This is Geekbench 6, and you can see we get 2,400 for single core score, just over 13,000 for a multi-core score, and integrated graphic tests here. Well, TimeSpy, it's a typical 3D Mark benchmark, and this is the highest score I have seen to date with integrated graphics for the graphics score. Typically, the Radeon 780M was the fastest before for integrated graphics, getting around the 2,800, sometimes to about 3,000 max scores if it had the very fast RAM. So this is a good 400, 500 points higher than most of the AMD integrated graphics in synthetic benchmarks. Gaming is a different story, and you'll see later on I will be testing that out in this review. The stress test for TimeSpy is a pass, which is great. So the stability there was 97.5%. That's 20 loops there of the test. And Night Raid did run this, again, the highest score I've seen for the graphics score for integrated graphics of 35,000, just over. Very good there. Now, Cinebench, this is the latest version, 2024. You can see we got just over 100 points for the single core and 727 for multi-core score there. So good results there. Very quick. Big step up from the 13th gen. Not really. No, not with the CPU, but with integrated graphics, we do have a nice bump up in performance. So I am using Chrome here, and this is YouTube in 8K 60 frames per second video, and you can see occasionally it is dropping a few frames here and there. But in general, this performance is really good. I'm impressed with the way the Arc graphics is decoding this. As you can see, it's just occasionally that drops those frames, but very good video playback performance, handling 8K 60 really well. And this file I'm playing right now is a 4K 60 HEVC file with a high bit rate. You can see the Arc graphics isn't too stressed out by this. It's getting up to about 40% load there. And let's make that full screen. It's not dropping any frames either, by the way. I've checked this out, so it's a solid 4K 60 looking very smooth. Adobe Premiere Pro, this is the latest version here that I am running, so it's 2024, and the timeline, I have 4K clips in here that are 100 megabits per second, shot on a Sony a6400. You can see this timeline is very good, and that is full playback. Now, normally what I do is set this to half or a quarter because it can sometimes get choppy, but the performance is that good here now with the Arc graphics that, unlike the Iris Xe graphics, I feel I don't need to lower that down at all. I have been impressed with just how good it is in the timeline, how quick and snappy everything is. Now, I do have it in the performance mode. All of my tests are done in the performance mode here, and what I've noticed too with it is that it doesn't seem to be dropping any frames. It is really rock solid, this performance. Almost like a dedicated GPU. It just feels that much quicker, which is a welcome change here because it could be choppy before, not anymore. So I'm going to do an export test here, and this is going to be just a 1 minute of footage that I do for integrated graphics still, okay? But yeah, you can work that out from the other videos that I've done the same test with, and it'll be the YouTube preset 4K, and I'll show you how long it takes. There we go. So with my delay there, with hitting the start, that was about 26 seconds. So that is a 10-second improvement in video encoding with the new GPU now, using QuickSync, of course. So it's all hardware accelerated. So that's an impressive improvement from the 1360 that I did review in the last Zenbook, and that was the OLED flip model from them. So that's great. Great to see this improvement with Intel, and you just can't beat this kind of performance. So 1 minute of footage only took about 26 seconds. And onto our gaming performance. While this is a business-focused laptop, well, you can do a bit of gaming on the side because of the Arc graphics, and it has those 8 Xe cores. Now, I set Cyberpunk here to the low graphics preset, and you can see it's a little choppy. It's not too great at 1080p, and I wouldn't play at 1080p here. We can see it's getting down to 7 frames per second. Now, the thermals bouncing around the sort of lower to mid 80s, sometimes upper 80s is what it gets up to. It's in the performance mode again, and the fan, yeah, you can hear it, definitely. It's on, it's going. And now The Witcher 3, The Wild Hunt. I set this one to 1080p because I think it can do it with a decent kind of frame rate. We're getting around the 50s here, which is good, but in some areas you see the frame rate will drop down to the lower 40s, sometimes the upper 30s around, but on average it's pretty good, pretty playable, around 50 frames per second at 1080p. Now this is on the lowest preset too, by the way, so performance is a big improvement from what we had with the previous Iris Xe graphics. This is really up to, it's almost twice the performance. Now this would be in the sort of mid to upper 20s than what we had before, so that's a welcome change here. Now I'll just test it very quickly at 720p. So this is looking a lot better now. 720p is probably the way to go. I mean, this is a lot smoother. We're getting on average around about 63 frames per second here. So it is good, and creeping up now in certain areas of the map. It's just a lot smoother, even though, okay, it doesn't look quite as good as 1080p. HD still seems good for these more demanding titles. Now, Assassin's Creed Valhalla, this is running in 1080p at the moment. You see it's just scraping over 30 frames per second. So if you don't mind gaming like you're gaming on a older gen console, locked sort of to 30 frames per second at 1080p, then it's fine. But I think, again, it's another title you want to run at 720p. But still, good to see it can run it with these kind of frames for integrated graphics and from Intel. Then around the in-game benchmark 2 for Shadow of the Tomb Raider, this was at 1080p, the lowest setting preset, and I got a perfect average frames per second of 60. So that means that game is quite playable at 1080p. It is a lighter engine, doesn't need a huge amount of power to run it, and this is where we're seeing a game that I think a little bit more optimized for the ARC integrated graphics with the Intel drivers, at least better than the other games I've tested. Esports titles now, so this is Counter-Strike up against some bots here with Dust 2. Very good frame rate, so most of the time over 100 frames per second, matching that 120 refresh rate, which is good, and very, very smooth. And I know I'm a terrible aim here, and this is up against bots, so I'm not doing too well, but great performance for those older titles with the ARC graphics. But how about our temperatures now? After all of those tests I've been doing, in fact, I've been using this laptop for a long time. You can see that I've had HW info here up for 328 hours. Yes, that long. So wattage, well, the power limit too is 115 watts. And I have seen it use up to here. You can see the peak power usage is getting up there at around, well, 61 watts is what I've seen so far, 66. And that's pretty high for a 45 watt part. Now, it did end up throttling. You can see the core throttled. It got to 104 degrees, so it does get hot. And this is when the fan profile, the RPM, takes a little while to ramp up. So it will spike at that 4 degrees, but I can happily report that despite this, it does drop down into the 90s when you're doing very demanding work, like encoding video, for example, pushing it really hard, benchmarks or a bit of gaming. Those temperatures get up there, but they're not always just sitting in the hundreds. No, they're only in the late 80s, early 90s. And so it does settle down, and average temps have been very good. You can see 51, 59, and this is after using it for so many hours here with just general workloads. I've been doing a lot of dual screen stuff that has just been Chrome, watching movies and whatnot. That is not stressful at all, and that's when you don't really hear the fan too much. However, when you push it in the performance mode, you are going to hear that fan. So here's a sample under full load, worst case scenario. Now, you might be wanting to know about Linux support on this. I tried Linux Manjaro and it's a bit too complicated. I couldn't get it running properly because of the dual screens, the Bluetooth keyboard and whatnot. It's going to be a little bit difficult there. Now, battery life of the Zenbook Duo is very good if you're using it like this, just in the laptop mode. It is really good for a 75 watt hour battery. It can go for 11 hours with the screen brightness set to 30%, which is absolutely amazing. However, when, of course, you take off that keyboard and you use those dual screens now, this is where the battery life is basically halved. You're going to get 5 to 6 hours when you're running it like this, which is the mode I really love, especially when editing videos, and you really need to be a lot more productive, have those two screens, you can take it with you. That then brings me on to the pros and the cons of the unit. Well, the build quality is excellent, the keyboard's fantastic, really good. There's basically no compromises. It's just like a normal keyboard, but having the Bluetooth, and it just magnetically sits on top of that other screen. It's a fantastic design what they've done with this. Kickstand quality is really good, and of course those OLED 120 Hz screens, 14 inches, 3K resolution, they are fantastic. Really deep blacks, and with HDR content go up to 550 nits. So it all checks out. However, there's a couple of things that I have noticed that I want to mention. One is the SSD speeds. I don't think they're amazing for the price of this unit, which is the other con, the price. This is an expensive laptop. It's about 2,500 euros. This configuration with the Core Ultra 9 185H, getting pricey, 32 gigabytes of RAM and only 1 terabyte SSD. So if you wanted 4 terabytes or 2, you wanted to upgrade it, unfortunately that's a little complicated. You got to open it up and that's a bit more difficult. Sadly, that hatch that I showed you on the back, just under where the kickstand is, doesn't relate to where the location of that SSD is. It's kind of strange that it's like that, but anyway, that's how it is. Other than that, really loving my time with this laptop here, and thanks a lot for watching this, yes, long, but hopefully detailed review that answers any questions you may have. And if you do have any, let me know in the comments. Thanks a lot for watching.